On Mother's Day, I received a card and my daughter made me read it out loud. Roses are red, violets are blue. You're a heavy burden and nobody wants you. Everyone laughed at me. I'm Catherine. I'm 74 years old, and that was the worst humiliation of my life. It was Sunday morning. The sun was streaming through the living room windows when I arrived at my daughter Sarah's house to celebrate my day. I was wearing my favorite green dress, the one that made me feel elegant. I had brought fresh flowers and sweets for my grandchildren. "Grandma Catherine," the little ones shouted, running towards me. Their hugs filled my heart with joy. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Chris, my son-in-law, barely greeted me with a nod. Sarah appeared from the kitchen with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, so glad you made it. We have a special surprise for you." I sat on the couch surrounded by my family. The grandchildren settled at my feet, expectant. Sarah pulled a pink card from her purse and handed it to me. "It's from all of us, Mom. Read it out loud so everyone can hear." My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. The card had little flower drawings made by the children. How sweet, I thought. I began to read in a clear, excited voice. "Roses are red, violets are—" My voice broke. The next words hit me like punches. "You're a heavy burden. Nobody wants you here. Your time has passed. It's time for you to go. Signed, your family that can't stand you anymore." The silence was deafening for 3 eternal seconds. Then Chris started to laugh. A cruel, mocking laugh. Sarah covered her mouth, but I could see she was laughing too. Even the children, not fully understanding, started to laugh because the adults were. "Did you see your face, Mom?" Sarah said between laughs. "You should have seen yourself. Chris, did you get a picture?" My heart shattered into a million pieces. Tears started rolling down my wrinkled cheeks. The card fell from my trembling hands to the floor. It was just a joke, Mom," Sarah continued, but her voice didn't have a hint of remorse. "Don't take it so seriously. You've always been so dramatic." Chris came over and picked up the card from the floor. "Yeah, Catherine, we were just playing around, but, you know." He paused awkwardly. "Lately you've been very present. Maybe it would be good for you to consider other options." "Other options?" I asked in a broken voice. "Well, you know." Sarah sat in front of me. "There are very nice homes for people your age, places where you can be with people like you. You'd be more comfortable." The word homes echoed in my head like a death sentence. My own children wanted to get rid of me like I was old trash. But I thought, my voice was barely a whisper, I thought I was coming to celebrate Mother's Day with you. "And you are celebrating Mom," Chris chimed in with a condescending tone. "It's just time to be realistic. You're not young anymore. You need special care. And we have our own lives." The grandchildren looked at me confused. The oldest, just 8, came over and took my hand. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Before I could answer, Sarah pulled him towards her. "Come here, sweetie. Grandma's fine. She's just being sentimental." I sat there feeling more alone than ever in my life. On the day that was supposed to celebrate my motherhood, my own daughter had publicly humiliated me. She had turned me into the family's cruel joke. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. I should go." "Okay, Mom." Sarah didn't even get up to say goodbye. "We'll call you later." I walked to the door with what little dignity I had left, but inside my world had completely fallen apart. That night in my empty house, I cried until I had no tears left, but something had changed in me. The humiliation had awakened something that had been dormant for years. It was time for my family to learn the truth about who Catherine really was. The next day I blocked all their accounts, but first I needed to remember how I had gotten to this painful moment. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had nursed Sarah 45 years ago, and let the memories flow like a movie in my mind. It all started when I was 29. Sarah's father left us when she was just 3 years old. One morning he was simply gone. He left a note on the kitchen table. "I can't handle this life. I'm sorry." He didn't even say goodbye to his daughter. I remember that night holding Sarah while she cried asking for her daddy. "Daddy had to go far away, my love," I whispered, promising myself she would never want for anything, and I kept that promise. I worked double shifts at the textile factory for 15 years. My hands became calloused from sewing uniforms late into the night. Every extra cent I saved for Sarah's education. When she was 17 and wanted to study nursing, I sold my mother's jewelry. It was the only valuable thing I owned, but I saw my daughter's bright eyes talking about her dream, and I didn't hesitate for a second. "Mom, are you sure?" she asked me that day. "Completely sure, my love. Your education is the most important thing." During her 5 years of college, I worked weekends cleaning offices. I would come home with my back aching, but when I saw Sarah studying at the dining table, it was all worth it. The day of her graduation, I cried with pride. "We did it, Mom," she said, hugging me tight. "This wouldn't have been possible without you." Then she met Chris. At first, I liked him. He was polite, hardworking, and seemed to genuinely love her. When they got married, I paid for half the wedding. It was $12,000 I had saved for years, but I wanted my daughter to have the wedding of her dreams. "Mom, this is too much," Sarah protested when I gave her the check. "Nonsense," I said, smiling. "It's the most important day of your life. You deserve it." When they bought their first house, I gave them the down payment, $25,000. It was everything I had saved, but seeing them happy in their home filled me with satisfaction. Then came the grandchildren, 2 beautiful little ones who became the light of my life. When Sarah went back to work after her maternity leave, I became their free nanny. Every day for 3 years, I walked 6 blocks to their house at 6 in the morning. I made the kids breakfast, dressed them, took them to the park, fed them, bathed them, and read them stories. When Sarah came home from work, the house was clean and the children were happy. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom," Sarah used to say in those days. "You're an angel." But gradually something changed. The thank yous became less frequent. My opinions on the children started to be seen as interference. When I suggested the youngest needed to see the pediatrician for his persistent cough, Chris told me, "Catherine, we're the parents here." The first time they spoke to me like that, I stayed quiet. I thought maybe I'd been too nosy. Then the subtle comments began. "Mom, you don't have the energy you used to for the kids." "Catherine, I think you mixed up the kids' vitamins again. Maybe you should rest more at your house." But I kept going every day. I kept helping. I kept giving my all. 2 years ago, when Chris lost his job, I started giving them $500 a month so they wouldn't lose the house. "It's just temporary," they told me, "just until Chris finds something better." Chris found a job 6 months later, but they never told me to stop giving them the money. They just kept receiving it as if it were their right. When the kids needed computers for school, I paid $2,000 without them asking. When Sarah's car broke down, I gave $4,000 for the repair. When they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I contributed $8,000. And little by little, I became the silent provider, the one who was always there to solve financial problems, but who was no longer invited to important family decisions. A year ago, Sarah organized a family dinner for Chris's birthday. I found out by chance when one of my grandchildren mentioned the secret party they had. "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked Sarah on the phone. "Oh, Mom, it was something very small, just the 4 of us. We thought you'd be bored." But I saw the photos on social media. There were 20 people. Chris's relatives that I knew well. Everyone had been invited except me. That night I cried in silence, but I told myself it was probably an oversight. The oversights became routine. They forgot to call me on my birthday. They canceled our lunch dates. When I showed up unannounced, they always seemed annoyed by the interruption. But the last straw came 3 months ago. I was at their house helping with dinner when I heard Chris talking on the phone in the backyard. "Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone. She's getting very dependent. No, she's not sick, but you know how they are at that age. Yes, we're looking at options to move her to a suitable place." I froze behind the door. My own son-in-law was planning to get rid of me like an old piece of furniture. I couldn't sleep that night. I had given my whole life, all my money, all my love to this family. And now I was just a burden they wanted to be free of. But they didn't know something very important about me, something I had kept secret for decades. My mother, before she died, had told me about a family property in Spain that I inherited when I turned 70. A house in Madrid that had been rented for decades. The money accumulated in an account I never touched. I also had investments I made with the inheritance from my Aunt Linda, who died childless and left me everything. Bonds, stocks, certificates of deposit. Money that grew silently while I lived on my modest pension. In total, I had nearly $400,000 that my family knew nothing about. They thought I was a poor old woman living on government handouts. They didn't know I had been discreetly financing their comfortable life for years, not out of necessity, but out of love. But after the humiliation on Mother's Day, something inside me broke for good. It was time they learned the true value of Catherine. That cruel card was my awakening. I sat in my living room all night on Mother's Day, holding that damned card in my trembling hands. The words kept echoing in my head. "You're a heavy burden. Nobody wants you here." But as the tears dried on my cheeks, something strange began to happen. The sadness transformed into something more powerful. Clarity, determination. For the first time in decades, I saw my situation with complete honesty. I wasn't a burden. I was the one keeping them afloat. I stood up slowly and went to my room. I took out a wooden box from my dresser that I hadn't opened in months. Inside were all my important documents: bank statements, deeds, investment certificates. As I went through them paper by paper, I did mental calculations that left me breathless. In the last 5 years, I had given Sarah and Chris exactly $67,000. $67,000 they received as if it were their birthright while treating me worse and worse. The down payment for their house, $25,000, the wedding, $12,000, monthly help for 2 years, $12,000, the kids' computers, $2,000, the car repair, $4,000, the kitchen remodel, $8,000, and hundreds of small expenses that added up to another $4,000. Meanwhile, I continued to live in the same modest house, wearing the same green dress on Sundays, walking to the supermarket to save on transportation. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What really broke my heart was remembering how their treatment of me had changed. I remembered my oldest grandson's birthday 6 months ago. I had arrived early to help decorate, as I always did. But when I knocked on the door, Chris opened it with an annoyed look on his face. "Catherine, the party doesn't start until 3. Why are you so early?" "I thought I could help with the preparations," I said with a smile. "We don't need help. Sarah has everything under control." Behind him, I saw Emily, Chris's mother, hanging balloons in the living room. She had been invited to help. I was treated like an unwelcome guest. "I can wait outside until 3, I mumbled, feeling humiliated. "Don't be dramatic, Mom." Sarah appeared, wiping her hands on an apron. "You can stay, but don't get in the way in the kitchen. You know you get confused with the recipes." I got confused with recipes. Me, who had cooked for that family for decades. That day I sat in a corner of the yard like a stranger at my own grandson's party. I watched Emily help with the food, how the other guests praised her for the cake she had made, while I, who had paid for half the party's expenses, was completely ignored. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, I stayed in the back while everyone formed a circle around my grandson. No one noticed I wasn't in the family photos. That night, my grandson came up to me as I was discreetly clearing some dirty plates. "Grandma, why were you so quiet today?" "I was just tired, my love. I lied. Grandma Emily says you're too old for big parties now." The child's words pierced me like knives. Emily, who was only 3 years younger than me, was telling my own grandchildren that I was too old. But even after that humiliation, I kept giving money. I kept helping. I kept hoping things would get better. What a fool I had been. I also remembered last Christmas. I had bought expensive gifts for everyone. A new bike for the oldest grandson, a tablet for the youngest, French perfume for Sarah, a power tool Chris had mentioned wanting. I spent almost $3,000 on those gifts. On Christmas Eve, I arrived with my hands full of beautifully wrapped packages. The kids ran to me excitedly, but Sarah quickly called them over. "Kids, put Grandma's presents under the tree with the others. We'll open them all together tomorrow." My gifts were lost in the mountain of packages they had bought. When it was time to open them, no one mentioned who had given what. The children vaguely thanked everyone for their presents, but the most painful part came later. I had also brought a special gift for Sarah, a pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. It was an antique, valuable piece full of family history. "Mom, it's very pretty," Sarah said without even trying it on. "But you know I don't wear much jewelry. Maybe you should save it for when the grandkids are older." She handed the box back to me, without even opening the clasp to see the pearls up close. I had imagined that moment for months, thinking about how my daughter would look wearing the same pearls that had adorned 3 generations of women in our family. That night in my empty house, I cried, hugging the little pearl box. It wasn't the monetary value that hurt, it was the complete indifference to something that came from my heart. But the final straw came 2 months ago when I got the flu. I was in bed for a week with a high fever. I couldn't cook. I could barely get up to go to the bathroom. I called Sarah to ask if she could bring me some food or at least check on me. "Oh, Mom, we're super busy right now. Chris has a big project at work, and I have a double shift at the hospital. Can't you ask a neighbor?" "But honey, I can barely walk." "Mom, you're not a child anymore. You have to learn to take care of yourself. We can't come running every time you get a cold." A cold. I had a 102-degree fever, and she called it a cold. She hung up the phone and didn't call back all week. It was Margaret, my 82-year-old neighbor, who brought me homemade soup and made sure I took my medicine. A woman I barely knew showed more concern for me than my own daughter. When I finally recovered and went back to my routine of visiting my family, no one asked how I had been. It was as if that terrible week had never happened. And now, sitting with those bank documents in front of me, I understood with painful clarity my real place in my family's life. I wasn't the beloved grandmother. I was the emotional ATM. When they needed money, there was Catherine. When they needed a free nanny, there was Catherine. When they needed a scapegoat for their frustrations, there was Catherine. But when Catherine needed love, care, respect, or just a phone call during an illness, Catherine didn't exist. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I took out my old laptop and logged into my online banking for the first time in months. I had to make some important changes. First, I canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $500 that went to Sarah's account. Second, I closed the joint savings account we had opened for family emergencies, which only they used. Third, I changed my will. Everything I had designated for Sarah and Chris would now go to a foundation for abandoned seniors. And fourth, I did something I never thought I would do. I bought a plane ticket. It was time to see that property in Madrid I had inherited. It was time to start the life I deserved. But before I left, I was going to make sure my family understood exactly what they had lost. It was Tuesday morning when I executed my plan. I had barely slept 3 hours, but for the first time in years, I felt completely awake, completely determined. I put on my most elegant gray suit, the one I had bought for Sarah's college graduation, but had hardly worn. I did my makeup carefully and styled my hair back into a sophisticated bun. I wanted to look like the powerful woman I really was, not the needy old woman they thought I was. First, I went to the bank. My financial advisor, Mr. Tobias, was surprised to see me so early. "Mrs. Catherine, how can I help you today?" "I need to make several important changes to my accounts," I said in a firm voice. For the next 2 hours, I completely reorganized my finances. I canceled all automatic transfers to Sarah's accounts. I closed the joint account we had opened 3 years ago. I transferred money from my investments to my main checking account. "Are you sure about these changes, ma'am?" Mr. Tobias asked, clearly concerned. "These are very big moves." "Completely sure. It's my money, and I can do what I want with it." Then I went to my lawyer's office, Mr. Eliseo, who had handled my family's legal affairs for decades. "I need to change my will completely," I announced without preamble. Eliseo, an older man who had known me since Sarah was little, took off his glasses and looked at me with concern. "Catherine, is everything all right? This is a very drastic change." "Everything is perfectly fine. For the first time in years, I see things with total clarity." I explained exactly what I wanted. Everything designated for Sarah and Chris would now go to the Forsaken Elders Foundation. I also set up a trust fund for my grandchildren that they could only access when they turned 25 and only if they maintained genuine contact with me, not out of family obligation. "Catherine, don't you think you should think about it for a few more days? These decisions are irreversible. I've had 74 years to think about it, Eliseo, and the last 5 years have taught me everything I needed to know. I signed the documents with a steady hand. There was no tremor, no doubt. My next stop was the travel agency. I had researched my Madrid property all night. It was a 3-bedroom apartment in the Salamanca neighborhood, an elegant area of the city. It had been rented for years by a property management company, generating income that accumulated in a Spanish account I had never touched. "I want to fly to Madrid this Friday," I told the travel agent. "Is this a tourist trip, ma'am?" "No, it's a trip of liberation. I bought a first-class ticket. If I was going to start my new life, I was going to do it in style. But before I left, I had one more thing to do. I had to write the letters." I got home at noon and sat at my desk. I took out elegant letterhead paper I had bought years ago but never used. It was time to explain to my family exactly what had happened. The first letter was to Sarah. "My dear daughter, by the time you read this letter, I will be on my way to Madrid, where I will live in the property I inherited from my family, which you did not know existed. I have made the decision to cut off all financial support I have been giving you for the past few years. The $500 a month you received has been permanently canceled. The joint account you used for emergencies has been closed. Don't take this as a punishment, but as a lesson in independence. I should have taught you long ago. For decades, I gave you everything I had: my time, my money, my energy, my unconditional love. But at some point, you decided I was a burden instead of a blessing. The Mother's Day card was simply the last straw. But the problem started long before that, when you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as your personal employee and private bank. I have changed my will. My inheritance will now go to people who truly value generosity and family love. Your children will have access to a trust fund when they turn 25, but only if they prove they can maintain a genuine relationship with me. Don't look for me for money. Don't call me asking me to come back. Don't send the grandchildren to emotionally manipulate me. If you truly want to get your mother back, you will have to prove that you value me for who I am, not for what I can give you. Your mother, who finally learned to value herself, Catherine." The second letter was to Chris. "Chris, I never considered you just my son-in-law. I accepted you as the son I never had, but you turned me into the inconvenient mother-in-law you wanted to get rid of. I heard your phone conversation 3 months ago when you were talking about finding a suitable place to move me as if I were an old piece of furniture in the way. What you didn't know is that suitable place was always in my hands. I have a property in Spain investments that generate more money than you earn in a year, and the financial freedom to live wherever and however I choose. For years, I silently financed your comfortable lifestyle. I paid for repairs, helped with expenses, covered emergencies. I did it out of love, not obligation. But you interpreted my generosity as weakness, my availability as dependency, my love as a nuisance. Now you're going to learn what it feels like to live without the nuisance of Catherine, the woman who will no longer be your problem, Catherine." The third letter was the hardest to write. It was for my grandchildren. "My dearest treasures, Grandma has to go far away for a while. Not because I don't love you, but because I love you so much that I need to teach you a very important lesson. Your parents have been treating me very badly lately. They have made me feel like I am a nuisance instead of their grandmother. That makes me very sad, but you are not to blame for anything. You have always been sweet to me, always given me sincere hugs and kisses. I'm going to live in Spain for a while. It's a very beautiful country where Grandma has a house. When you are older, you can visit me if you want. In the meantime, I want you to remember that Grandma loves you more than anything in the world, and that I will always, always be here for you when you truly need me. If your parents tell you ugly things about me, don't believe them. You know your grandma, and you know I would never do anything to hurt my family. Take good care of yourselves. Study hard, and never forget that you are the most beautiful thing life has given me. Love you forever. Grandma Catherine. P.S. Keep this letter. When you're older, you'll understand why Grandma had to be so brave." I sealed the 3 letters in elegant envelopes and left them on the dining room table. I also left the house keys, the insurance documents, and an additional note explaining that the house was paid for and they could sell it if they wanted, but the profits would go directly to my account in Spain. That night, I packed my bags. I didn't take much. Elegant clothes, my jewelry, important documents, photos of my grandchildren, and my grandmother's pearl necklace that Sarah had rejected. What excited me most was taking with me the freedom that had been buried for decades under layers of family guilt and misunderstood obligations. On Thursday night, I called Margaret, my neighbor, and asked her for a favor. "Could you deliver these letters tomorrow afternoon after I've already left?" "Of course, Catherine. Are you sure about what you're doing?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." On Friday morning, I took a taxi to the airport. It was the first time in decades I had traveled alone without having to ask anyone's permission, without having to explain my decisions, without having to feel guilty for spending money on myself. As the plane took off, I looked out the window at the city that had been my home for 74 years. I didn't feel nostalgia. I didn't feel fear. I felt something I had forgotten existed. Hope. My phone was off. In a few hours, Margaret would deliver the letters, and the real lesson for my family would begin. But that was no longer my problem. My problem now was to discover who Catherine was when no one needed her, used her, or took her for granted. It was going to be a beautiful adventure. The plane landed in Madrid at 7 a.m. local time. I had slept through the entire flight for the first time in years. There were no nightmares about being rejected. No worries about whether I had left enough food prepared for someone else. Just a deep, restful sleep. As I waited for my luggage, I turned on my phone for the first time in 24 hours. It immediately started vibrating like crazy. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, 12 voicemails, all from Sarah and Chris. I didn't listen to them. I didn't read them. I just turned the phone off again and smiled. The plan was working exactly as I had hoped. I took a taxi to the Salamanca neighborhood. The driver, an older man named Charles, asked me in basic English if it was my first time in Madrid. "Yes and no," I replied. "It's my first time, but this is my home." "Ah, a local returning home." He smiled through the rearview mirror. "Welcome back, ma'am." Welcome back. Those words resonated in my heart in an unexpected way. For the first time in years, someone was welcoming me somewhere. The address I had was 95 Serrano Street. When the taxi stopped in front of an elegant white stone building with wrought iron balconies, I thought there had been a mistake. "Are you sure this is it?" I asked Charles. "Completely sure, ma'am. 95 Serrano Street. It's a very elegant building." I paid the taxi and stood on the sidewalk looking up. My property was on the 5th floor. The balconies had pots with bright red flowers. The windows had white lace curtains that moved gently in the morning breeze. The doorman, a distinguished man in his 60s, came to help me with my luggage. "Mrs. Catherine?" he asked. "Yes, that's me." "How wonderful. I'm James, the doorman. The management company told me you were coming. We've been waiting years to meet you." Years waiting to meet me. No one in my own city had ever waited to meet me. James escorted me in the elevator to the 5th floor. He took out a set of antique keys and opened a dark wooden door with my family name engraved on a brass plate. Mendoza family. When the door opened, I gasped. The apartment was beautiful. Old hardwood floors, high ceilings with decorative moldings, huge windows that filled everything with natural light. The furniture was elegant but comfortable. Cream-colored leather sofas, a solid oak dining table, bookshelves filled with Spanish books. "Your family had very good taste," James commented as he helped me carry the bags to the master bedroom. "My family lived here." "Yes, ma'am. Your Aunt Linda lived here until 1995. Then your cousin Eleanor stayed until 2010. When she passed, the company started renting it out, but we always hoped the family would return one day." I walked slowly through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the family photographs I didn't know existed. In a dresser in the bedroom, I found photo albums with pictures of women who looked like me. My great-grandmother, my grandmother, aunts I never knew. In the kitchen, there was a handwritten note taped to the refrigerator. "To the next Mendoza who comes home, there is Spanish wine in the cellar." There are family recipes in the drawer next to the oven. There is love in every corner of this house. Welcome home, cousin. With love, Eleanor, 2010. I sat in a kitchen chair and cried. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition. For the first time in decades, I was in a place where I truly belonged. James brought me coffee and pastries from a nearby bakery. Mrs. Eleanor always said that one day family from America would come. She was right. What was she like? A very elegant, very intelligent woman. She gave piano lessons to the neighborhood children. Everyone loved her. She said the Mendoza women were strong, that they never gave up. Now, the Mendoza women were strong. I had forgotten I was a Mendoza woman. For so many years I had defined myself only as Sarah's mother, or the children's grandmother. I had forgotten I had my own identity, my own history, my own strength. That afternoon, I walked through the neighborhood. It was like being in a European movie. Cobblestone streets, cafes with tables on the sidewalks, old bookstores, flower markets. People walked, slowly stopped to chat, seemed to enjoy every moment. In a nearby square, a group of ladies were playing cards under the trees. One of them, a woman with silver hair and bright eyes, smiled and greeted me. "Are you new to the neighborhood?" she asked. "I'm new, but I'm not new," I replied. "I just moved into my family's apartment on Serrano 95. "Ah, you're Eleanor's niece. She told us a lot about you." "I'm Emily. Come sit with us." I joined their card table. For the next 3 hours, I laughed more than I had in the last 5 years. These women treated me like a lifelong friend. They asked me about my life, my interests, my opinions. They didn't ask how much money I had or what I could do for them. "Eleanor always told us that when you came, we were to take very good care of you," Emily told me as we packed up the cards. "She said you had sacrificed a lot for your family in America and deserved to be happy." Eleanor knew about my sacrifices. A cousin I never knew had understood my life better than my own daughter. That night alone in my beautiful apartment, I turned on my phone to check the messages. 17 more had arrived since the morning. Sarah's messages had evolved throughout the day. First message, 8 a.m. "Mom, where are you?" Margaret brought a very strange letter. Second message, 9:30 a.m. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just leave like this. Call me immediately." Third message, 11 a.m. "Seriously, you canceled our accounts. How are we going to pay for the kids' school?" Fourth message, 2 p.m. "Mom, the kids are crying. They say you left because you don't love them." Fifth message, 4 p.m. "Mom, the bank says you closed everything. How could you do this to us?" Chris's messages were directly hostile. "Catherine, stop the drama. Come back right now. If you think this is going to work, you're very mistaken. We know where to find you. This is the most selfish thing you've ever done in your life." But the last message was different. It was from Sarah, sent just an hour before. "Mom, please. I read your whole letter. I talked to the kids. They're very sad. I'm sad too. Please call me. I promise we can fix this." I put the phone away without answering any messages. It was too soon for promises. First, they had to truly understand what they had lost. I poured myself a glass of the Spanish wine Eleanor had saved for me in the cellar. It was a 1995 Rioja, from the year she moved into the apartment. As I savored it, I read the family recipes I had found in the kitchen drawer. They were handwritten recipes from generations of Mendoza women. My great-grandmother's paella, my grandmother's flan, Aunt Linda's Spanish tortilla, cousin Eleanor's gazpacho. For the first time in my life, I belonged to something bigger than the role of a sacrificial mother. I was part of a line of strong, intelligent women who had maintained traditions and love through decades. That night, I slept in the bed where my cousin Eleanor had slept, surrounded by the love of women I never met, but who had been waiting for me my whole life. The next day, my phone had rung 57 times during the night, but I had slept soundly with the phone on silent. It was time for my family to learn to live without their emotional ATM, and it was time for Catherine to learn to live for Catherine. My phone had rung 57 times during the night. When I woke up in my new bed in Madrid, the first thing I saw were the accumulated notifications on the screen. 73 missed calls, 89 text messages, 22 voicemails. But instead of the anxiety I would have felt before, I experienced something completely different. Power. For the first time in decades, I was in total control of the situation. I got up slowly, made Spanish coffee with the Italian coffee maker I found in the kitchen, and sat on the balcony to watch Madrid wake up. From my 5th floor, I could see the life of the city. People walking to work, children going to school, elderly people sitting on park benches reading newspapers. No one needed me. No one depended on me. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt liberating instead of painful. I decided to listen to just one voicemail to gauge how desperate they were. It was from Chris, recorded at 3 in the morning. "Catherine, this isn't funny anymore. The kids have to go to school and we don't have money for this month's tuition. Sarah is crying all the time. I don't know what's wrong with you, but this is cruel even for you. If you don't come back this week, we'll have to take legal action. You can't just abandon your family like this. Call me." Legal action. How interesting. What legal action could they take against a woman who had decided to stop giving away her money? I deleted the message and turned off the phone again. That morning, I went to explore the neighborhood with Emily, my new friend from the card group. She was 78. She had been a literature professor for 40 years and had a contagious energy. "Eleanor told me your family in America didn't value you as they should," she said as we walked to the market. "She said you were too generous for your own good." Eleanor really knew that much about my life. "Of course the cousins wrote letters for years. She kept all your letters in a box. They're in the bedroom closet if you want to read them." I had written letters to Eleanor. I didn't remember corresponding with any cousin in Spain. When I returned to the apartment that afternoon, I looked in the closet and found a wooden box with my name engraved on it. Inside were dozens of letters, all written by me over the last 20 years. With surprise, I remembered. I had been sending Christmas cards to the Madrid address my mother had. I thought they never reached anyone specific, that it was just a family tradition. But Eleanor had received them all and kept them carefully. I read some of my own letters with new eyes. "Dear family in Spain this year, Sarah graduated from nursing school. I'm so proud. I sold Mom's jewelry to pay for her studies, but seeing her smile was worth every penny. Dear family, the grandkids are growing up so fast. I take care of them every day while Sarah works. It's exhausting, but I love them so much. Dear family, this year has been hard. Sometimes I feel like I give so much love and receive so little in return, but I guess that's normal when you're a mother." In the margins of my letters, Eleanor had written comments in Spanish. "My dear cousin is so generous. I wish she were here so we could take care of her. This woman needs to remember she deserves love too. One day she will come home and we will show her what it is to be valued." Eleanor had been worried about me for years. A woman I never met in person had understood me better than the people I lived with every day. At the back of the box was a letter dated just 2 months before Eleanor's death. "For my cousin Catherine in America, if you are reading this, it means you finally found the courage to come home. It means you finally said enough to the people who took you for granted. I have read all your letters for 20 years. I have seen how your generosity turned into exploitation. I have seen how your unconditional love became your weakness. But the Mendoza women are strong. You just needed to remember who you are. This apartment is yours. The money that has accumulated in the Spanish account is yours. The friends I have cultivated in the neighborhood are waiting for you. The life you deserve is here ready for you. Don't feel guilty for choosing yourself. Feel proud. Your cousin who loved you without knowing you, Eleanor." P.S. In the bottom drawer of the desk, there are documents that will surprise you. With trembling hands, I went to the desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside were bank statements, investment certificates, and legal documents. The Madrid property didn't just include the apartment. It also included 2 commercial spaces on the ground floor of the building that generated monthly rent. In addition, there was an investment account that had grown for decades. The total of my assets in Spain was $650,000. $650,000 that my family knew nothing about. I sat on the couch, overwhelmed by the reality of my situation. I wasn't just financially independent. I was wealthy. I was wealthier than Chris and Sarah combined. For years, they had treated me like a financial burden, when in reality, I had more money than they could earn in their entire lives. That afternoon, I turned on my phone for 5 minutes to see the latest messages. The desperation had escalated dramatically. Sarah, 10 a.m. Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you transferred all your money. Where to? How are we supposed to live? Chris, 11:30 a.m. Catherine, the school says if we don't pay this week, they're going to suspend the kids. Is that what you want? Sarah, 1 p.m. The kids ask me every day when Grandma is coming back. I told the teacher you're sick because I don't know how to explain that you abandoned your family. Chris, 2:30 p.m. I spoke with a lawyer. He says we can have you declared mentally incompetent if you keep acting irrationally. Think about it. Sarah, 4 p.m. Mom, please, I know you're angry, but this is affecting the children. It's not their fault. Please, come back. The most recent message was from an hour ago. Sarah. Mom, I found your flight number on your computer. I know you're in Madrid. I'm coming to find you. You can't escape your family forever. She was coming to find me. Perfect. It was exactly what I needed for the next step of my plan. That night, I called my lawyer, Eliseo, from Madrid. Catherine, how's Spain? Wonderful, Eliseo, but I need to ask you a favor. My daughter is going to try to have me declared mentally incompetent. I need medical documentation proving I'm perfectly sane. Are they really going to try that? They've already threatened to, but they're in for a very unpleasant surprise. The next day, I went to a private hospital in Madrid and had a complete psychological evaluation. The results were excellent. Perfect mental health, intact decision-making capacity, no signs of cognitive decline. I also hired a Spanish lawyer, a Mrs. Amalia, to handle my legal affairs in Madrid. Are you preparing for a legal battle with your family? She asked me. No, I'm preparing to win a war they didn't know they had started. That night, for the first time since I arrived in Madrid, I decided to reply to a message. But it wasn't going to be the message they expected. I wrote to Sarah. Dear daughter, I received your message about coming to find me. I'll save you the trip. I am perfectly fine, perfectly sane, and perfectly happy in Madrid. I have medical and legal documentation to prove it. If you insist on having me declared mentally incompetent, rest assured that I will immediately donate all my assets to charitable organizations. That includes the $650,000 I have in Spanish accounts that you knew nothing about. It also includes the immediate sale of my house, with the proceeds going to the same charity. If you truly want to get your mother back, you have to do something revolutionary. Treat me like a human being who deserves respect, not like a walking ATM. Your mother who finally values herself, Catherine. P.S. The next time you write to me, let it be to apologize, not to threaten me. I sent the message and turned off the phone with a smile. Now they were going to understand who really held the cards in this family. My message had the effect of a nuclear bomb. For the next 24 hours, my phone went completely crazy. Calls every 5 minutes, desperate messages arriving in waves, even video call attempts that I systematically ignored. But this time was different. They were no longer threats or arrogant demands. It was pure panic. I decided to listen to a few voicemails to gauge the level of desperation. Chris, 6 a.m. Catherine, please don't donate the money. We can talk. We can fix this. Just don't do anything drastic yet. Sarah, 7:30 a.m. Mom, $650,000. Why did you never tell us how is it possible you have so much money? Chris, 9 a.m. Look, maybe we were too hard on you. But that doesn't mean you have to punish the kids. They love you, Catherine. Sarah, 11 a.m. Mom, I talked to the kids. I explained that you're very angry with us. They want to talk to you. Please at least listen to your grandchildren. The last message was the most revealing. Chris, 2 p.m. Catherine, I went to the bank again. They told me you also have properties. How much money do you really have? We need to know what we're working with here. What we're working with. Even in his desperation, he couldn't stop seeing my money as something that belonged to them too. That morning I went for a walk in Retiro Park with Emily. It was a beautiful sunny day, perfect for reflecting on my new life. "You look different," Emily commented as we sat by the lake. "More radiant." "I feel different. For the first time in decades, I feel like I'm in control of my own life." "Your family is desperate. Completely. Now that they know how much money I really have, they're terrified of losing it. And you? Do you feel guilty?" The question took me by surprise. Did I feel guilty? I searched my heart for that familiar pang of guilt that had accompanied every decision of my adult life. It wasn't there. "No," I answered with genuine surprise. "I don't feel a shred of guilt. And that scares me a little." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've always felt guilty for everything, for spending money on myself, for saying no, for not being available 24/7. Guilt was my constant companion." "Guilt is a useful emotion when you've done something wrong," Emily reflected. "But chronic guilt is a tool of manipulation. Your family taught you to feel guilty for existing." Her words struck me like a bolt of lightning. My family had taught me to feel guilty for existing, for having needs, for having boundaries, for not being an inexhaustible source of resources and energy. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, something completely for myself. I went to an elegant boutique on Gran Via and bought myself 3 beautiful dresses: a vibrant red one, an emerald green one, an elegant black one. Then I went to a beauty salon and got a modern haircut, had my nails done, got a facial. I spent $800 on myself in a single day, $800 that I would have previously considered emergency money for the family. When I saw myself in the salon mirror, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She was elegant, self-confident, radiant. She was the Catherine who had been buried under decades of sacrifice and self-denial. That night, I decided it was time for the next phase of my plan. I turned on my phone and recorded a voice message to send to Sarah. "Daughter, I've been thinking about your messages. I see you're now very concerned about maintaining a relationship with me. How interesting. 2 weeks ago, I was a heavy burden that nobody wanted here. Now magically, I'm a valuable mother again. Do you know what the difference is? $650,000. That's literally the difference between being despised and being valued in this family. But here's a problem for you, Sarah. That money was always there. I was always the same person. The only difference is that now you know you can't get rid of me without devastating financial consequences. If you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to prove that you value me for who I am, not for what I have. And that proof is going to take time. A lot of time. In the meantime, I'm going to enjoy my life in Madrid, a life where I am respected, valued, and loved by people who don't need my money to treat me well. Your mother who finally learned the difference between being loved and being used." I sent the message and immediately turned off the phone again. The next day, James the doorman brought me some interesting news. "Mrs. Catherine, there's a young woman in the lobby asking for you. She says she's your daughter and she's come from America." My heart raced. Sarah had actually come to Madrid. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I couldn't give her information about residents without their authorization. She's sitting in the cafe across the street waiting." I looked out my living room window and saw her. Sarah was sitting at a table in the cafe, constantly looking towards my building. She looked tired, stressed, desperate. For a moment, I felt a maternal urge to run down and hug her, but I stopped myself. If I went down now, I would be sending the message that her desperation was enough for me to give in. I would be teaching her that she just needed to make a dramatic gesture for Mom to come rescue her again. No, this time things were going to be different. Instead of going down, I wrote a note and gave it to James to deliver to her. "Sarah, I see you came all the way to Madrid. That shows desperation, not love. If you really want to talk to me, you're going to have to do something you've never done before. Wait for me. You're going to have to prove that you're willing to invest time and effort in our relationship with no guarantee that you'll get what you want. I will be at the Central Cafe on Serrano Street tomorrow at 4 p.m. If you come alone, without Chris, without grandchildren, as emotional shields without ultimatums. You come to genuinely apologize and to listen to what I have to say. Or you don't come at all. Your mother, who is no longer available 24/7. From my window, I watched James deliver the note. I saw Sarah read it, saw her face go through different emotions: surprise, frustration, and finally something I hadn't seen in years: reluctant respect. She got up from the cafe table and walked slowly down the street, looking back several times at my building. I couldn't sleep well that night. Despite all my determination, she was my daughter, the little girl I had raised alone, the one I had dedicated my entire life to. But for the first time in our relationship, she was going to have to come to me on my terms. The next day, I got up early, put on my new red dress, did my makeup carefully, and prepared for the most important conversation of my life. It was time for Sarah to meet the new Catherine. And this Catherine was not going to beg for love ever again. I arrived at the Central Cafe at 3:50 p.m. I wanted to be there first, choose my table, control the environment. I sat at a table by the window with a perfect view of the entrance. I ordered a coffee and a chocolate cake. If this was going to be a difficult conversation, at least I was going to enjoy something sweet. At exactly 4 o'clock, I saw Sarah walking down the street. She was dressed conservatively: black pants, a white blouse, her hair pulled back. She looked nervous, insecure. It was the first time in years I had seen her like this. She entered the cafe and looked for me. When she found me, she walked towards my table with hesitant steps. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "Sit down, Sarah." She sat across from me, and for the first time in decades, I could really see my daughter. Not the arrogant woman who had humiliated me on Mother's Day, but the scared little girl she had been when her father left us. "You look different," she commented, looking at my red dress and my new haircut. "I feel different." "Mom, she began, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No, I'm going to speak first. For 45 years, I always let you speak first. Explain yourself first. Justify yourself first. This time, you're going to listen to me." Sarah nodded, clearly uncomfortable with not being in control of the conversation. "Do you know the exact moment I realized I was no longer your mother, but your employee?" I asked. "Mom, don't say that. It was your oldest son's birthday 6 months ago. Chris opened the door as if I were an unwelcome visitor. You treated me like I was the hired help. And Emily, Chris's mother, was treated as the honorary grandmother while I was ignored in a corner." Sarah looked down. "I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't realize, because for years you had stopped seeing me as a person. You saw me as a resource, a solution to your financial and childcare problems." "Mom, that's not true." "Isn't it true?" I took out my phone and read some of her recent messages. "How are we going to pay for the kids' school? How are we going to live? Not how are you, Mom? Not we miss you. Just panic about the money." Sarah fell silent, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But you know what hurt the most about all this?" I continued. "It wasn't the lack of money. It was the lack of respect. For years you both treated me as if I were a burden, as if I were a nuisance, as if my presence was an annoyance you had to tolerate. Mom, we never wanted you to feel that way." "Really? Then explain the Mother's Day card." Sarah broke down. The tears started to roll down her cheeks. That was horrible. I don't know why I did it. Chris said it would be funny that you'd know it was a joke. A joke humiliating your 74-year-old mother in front of the whole family seemed funny to you. No, it wasn't funny. It was cruel. It was the cruelest thing I've ever done in my life." For the first time in years, I heard genuine remorse in her voice. "Do you know what I thought that night when I got home?" I asked her. "I thought my own daughter would rather I were dead than alive. That's what that card told me." Sarah sobbed openly. "Mom, no, never. I never wanted you to feel that way." "But that's how I felt. And it wasn't just because of the card. It was because of years of being treated as invisible, as inconvenient as a problem you had to solve." The waiter discreetly came over and brought a pack of tissues for Sarah. She thanked him in broken Spanish. "You learned Spanish to come find me?" I asked. "I studied basic phrases on the plane. I wanted to be able to communicate to find you." For the first time since the conversation began, I felt a small flicker of tenderness towards my daughter. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. I didn't leave to punish you. I left to save myself." "Save yourself from what?" "From disappearing completely. from becoming a shadow of myself, from dying emotionally before I died physically. Mom, you could never disappear. You're the strongest person I know. I was strong. But you took that strength from me drop by drop, year after year. You turned me into a small, fearful version of myself. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at me directly for the first time in the conversation. What do I have to do? She asked in a broken voice. What do I have to do to get my mom back? First, you have to understand that the mom you knew no longer exists. That woman who was available 24/7, who gave money without asking questions, who accepted any treatment just to stay close to the family, that woman died on Mother's Day. And who are you now? I'm Catherine Mendoza. I'm a 74-year-old woman who discovered she has the right to be respected, who has the right to say no, who has the right to live for herself. Does that mean you don't love us anymore? The question pierced my heart. I love you, Sarah. I will always love you. But I will no longer love more than I am loved. I will no longer give more than I receive. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that if you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to build it from scratch. You're going to have to prove that you value me as a person, not as a financial provider. How? By calling me to ask how I am not to ask for money. By visiting me because you want to spend time with me, not because you need me to babysit. By including me in family decisions as a respected member, not as a tolerated stranger. Sarah nodded vigorously. I can do that. I want to do that. And Chris, her face darkened. Chris is very angry. He says this is emotional manipulation. He says you're blackmailing the family. Of course he's angry. His personal ATM has rebelled. Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it fair, Sarah? For years he treated me like I was an old piece of furniture. The only time he spoke to me directly was to tell me I was interfering with raising the children. He can change. Can he? Or are you going to try to convince him to pretend to respect me so the money comes back? Sarah fell silent, and in that silence, I had my answer. Look, daughter, I'm going to give you a chance. One single chance. But it's going to be on my terms. What are your terms? First, you're going to go home and solve your financial problems without my money. You're going to learn to live on what you earn, not on what I subsidize. But Mom, the kids' school. Second, you're going to look for public schools. You're going to sell the expensive car. You're going to cut expenses like any normal family that doesn't have a rich grandmother. And then if you really want a relationship with me, you're going to come visit me here in Madrid, without Chris the first time, just you, and we're going to spend a week getting to know each other as equal adults. When you prove you can stay in touch with me for 3 months without asking for money or favors. 3 months of calls, messages, letters, where we only talk as mother and daughter, not as an ATM and a client. Sarah took a deep breath. And if I do it, if I really change, will you come back? I don't know, honey. That Catherine who would come running back at the first sign of remorse no longer exists. This Catherine is going to take her time to decide what's best for her. For the first time in the conversation, I saw something I hadn't seen in years in my daughter's eyes, genuine respect. We sat in silence for several minutes after my ultimatum. Sarah stared at her cold coffee, processing everything I had told her. I watched her face looking for signs of manipulation or resistance, but I only saw an adult woman facing the real consequences of her actions for the first time. Can I ask you something, Mom? She finally said. Ask. Do you really have $650,000? I couldn't help but smile. Even in this moment of supposed emotional reflection, her mind was still on the money. I have more than that, honey, but that amount is no longer relevant to you. What do you mean? I changed my will. Everything is going to charity now. If one day you decide that you genuinely value me as a person, I might reconsider leaving something to my grandchildren. But you and Chris will not see a single cent of my inheritance. Her face turned pale. Mom, that's... What cruel unfair. For years you told me I was a burden, that you didn't want me around, that it was time for me to go to a home. I'm doing exactly what you asked. But we didn't mean... Of course you meant it. The difference is that now there are consequences. Sarah fell silent again, but I could see the emotions warring on her face. Finally, she asked, can the grandchildren visit you here? When they turn 18 and can make their own decisions, they will be welcome. But they will not be used as emotional tools to manipulate me. They miss you so much. I'm sure they do. But if they truly miss me for who I am and not for what I give them, that love will survive until they are adults. And if I manage to do what you ask, the 3 months without asking for anything, the visit to Madrid, then we'll talk about rebuilding our relationship. But it will be a different relationship, Sarah. It will be between equals. I will no longer be the mother who forgives everything and gives everything. I will be Catherine, a woman who deserves respect. She wiped her eyes one more time and nodded slowly. Can I hug you before I go? The question took me by surprise. We hadn't hugged genuinely in months. They were always mechanical hugs, social greetings, and goodbyes. You can try, I said. She stood up and walked to my side of the table. When she hugged me for the first time in years, I felt like she was really hugging me, not my wallet. I love you, Mom, she whispered in my ear. I love you too, honey. But this time, love is going to come with boundaries. She pulled away and looked me in the eyes. How will you know if I'm really changing? How will you know I'm not faking it? Because the new Catherine is very good at detecting lies, and because if you deceive me even once, this opportunity disappears forever. I paid the bill, and we walked together to the exit of the cafe. At the door, Sarah turned to me one last time. Mom, are you happy here? The question surprised me with its genuine sincerity. Yes, honey. For the first time in decades, I am genuinely happy. I'm glad to hear that, she said. And for the first time in the conversation, it sounded like she really meant it. We said goodbye at the corner. I walked towards my apartment, she towards her hotel. I didn't look back. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of Spanish wine and reflected on the conversation. It had been painful but necessary. For the first time in my adult life, I had set boundaries with my daughter. 3 days later, Sarah returned home. What I mentally called the probation period began. For the next few weeks, I received regular calls from her. At first, I could feel the temptation in her voice to ask for financial help or favors, but she restrained herself. We talked about simple things: the weather, her shifts at the hospital, how I was adjusting to Madrid. Chris, she told me, had had to get a second job to compensate for the loss of my financial support. They had moved the children to public schools. They had sold the expensive car and bought a used one. How does that feel? I asked her during one of our calls. Stressful, she admitted, but also liberating in a way. It's the first time in years we actually know how much money we have without depending on your help. Meanwhile, my life in Madrid was flourishing in ways I had never imagined. I joined Emily's book club. I started taking Spanish cooking classes. I even enrolled in an art history course at the local university for senior citizens. For the first time in my life, I had routines that didn't revolve around the needs of other people. On Tuesdays, I played cards with my new friends. On Thursdays, I went to the market and cooked family recipes I had found in Eleanor's drawers. On Saturdays, I visited museums. On Sundays, I simply rested, read, or walked in the park. It was a quiet life, but full of personal purpose. After 2 months, Sarah called me with unexpected news. Mom, Chris and I are going to couples therapy. Really? Yes. It turns out that when you don't have the constant financial stress and the presence of a third person funding your life, you have to face your real problems. And what are your real problems? That we never learned to be fully independent adults. We always had grandma as a safety net, so we never developed real crisis management skills. It was the most mature observation I had heard from my daughter in years. And how is Chris taking all this? At first he was furious with you, but the therapist made him see that he had also become dependent on your help. What does he say? He says he's ashamed to admit how much we depended on you. And now Now he says that if I ever see you again, he's going to apologize properly. He says he behaved like a spoiled child. 3 months after our meeting in Madrid, Sarah had kept her word. We had spoken regularly without her asking for money or favors once. We had had real conversations about our lives, our feelings, our dreams. "Can I come visit you now?" she asked me during our Sunday call. "You can come," I said. "But remember, you come as my adult daughter, not as the child looking for mom to solve her problems." "I understand." A week later, Sarah arrived in Madrid. But this time, it was different. She stayed in a hotel, not assuming she could stay in my apartment. She asked me what I would like to do during her visit, instead of arriving with her own agenda. We spent 5 beautiful days together. I showed her my new life, my friends, my classes, my favorite places. We cooked the family recipes I had discovered together. We talked like 2 adult women, not like a dependent mother and a demanding daughter. On the last day of her visit, as we were walking through Retiro Park, she asked me the question I had been waiting for. "Are you ever coming back home, Mom?" "Madrid is my home now," I replied, "but that doesn't mean I can't visit you from time to time." Really, if you continue to show that you value me as a person, if Chris truly apologizes and changes his behavior if the grandchildren can meet their real grandmother instead of the ATM grandmother, then yes, we can build something new. That night, before she left for the airport, Sarah gave me a letter. "Read it when I'm gone," she asked. After saying goodbye, I returned to my apartment and opened the letter. "Mom, thank you for teaching me the most important lesson of my life, that real love requires mutual respect. For years, I thought that because you were my mother, you had an obligation to love me unconditionally, no matter how I treated you. I thought family love meant I could take you for granted. Now I understand that unconditionally means you will always love me, but it doesn't mean you have to accept any treatment. I'm going to keep working on being the daughter you deserve. Not the daughter who takes everything she can get, but the daughter who gives as much as she receives. The grandchildren ask about you every day. I've explained to them that Grandma is learning to be happy, and that when we are better people we can visit her in her beautiful house in Spain. I love you, Mom. But now I love you with respect, your daughter who finally grew up, Sarah." That night, for the first time since Mother's Day, I cried. But these were tears of hope. 6 months later, I received an unexpected video call. It was from my grandchildren from Sarah's house. "Grandma Catherine," they shouted in unison, "we miss you so much." Behind them appeared Sarah and Chris. Chris looked different, more humble, less arrogant. "Catherine," Chris said, looking me directly in the eye through the screen, "I want to apologize. I behaved like an idiot. I treated you badly for years, and there's no excuse for that." "Thank you, Chris," I replied. "I accept your apology." "Is Grandma coming home?" my oldest grandson asked. "Grandma is home," I explained, "but maybe soon you can come visit her in Spain. Would you like that?" Their shouts of excitement were deafening. After hanging up, I sat in my living room smiling. It had taken 74 years, but I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life. You teach people how to treat you by what you are willing to accept. For decades, I accepted crumbs of love because I was afraid of being alone. But it turns out that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone without respect. And now that I had established my worth, my family was finally learning to value me. The phone rang. It was Sarah, like every Sunday at 7 in the evening, Madrid time. "Hi, Mom. How was your week?" For the first time in my life, someone was asking about me without wanting something in return. It was perfect, honey. Absolutely perfect.